and look for ways to try to ease our minds. Forced into a change, I guess it had to be this way. But do your best to try to stay away. The day they closed the world, we all went inside, looking for the light. The day they closed the world, we all realized what it means to try. So hold on to the love, don't you be afraid. There come a time when you will have your say, and don't forget to pray the Lord to keep us safe. We will live to fight another day. The day they closed the world, we all went inside, looking for the light. The day they closed the world, we all realized what it means to try. I can feel it coming, I can see it miles away. I can feel the sun of pride today. I can hear the laughter, I can see your smiling face. I can feel the love that's on the way. The day they closed the world, we all went inside, looking for the light. The day they closed the world, we all realized what it means to try. The day they closed the world, we all went outside, looking for the light. I can feel it coming, I can see it miles away. I can feel the sun of pride today. I can hear the laughter, I can see your smiling face. I can feel the love that's on the way. I can feel it coming, I can feel it coming. I can feel it coming, I can feel it coming. The day they close the world.
Do not fear, Saf is here. And welcome to Saf Buxy. This is Saf Surgery. We are Straight Talk in collaboration with Spiritually Gone Wild and Love Coach Academy. We are supporting his men's mental health charity and the prevention of suicide and aspire to be a recovery community from addiction. Wow, what a show we had last week. What a show with Dr. friggin' John D. Martini. Was he not awesome? Hoo-ha! Ferocious, aren't I? He was cool. He was cool. And we've got another great show tonight. Before I introduce this wonderful, wonderful human being, she's a founder and CEO of Addiction Therapeutic Services and RecoveryView.com. I'm not going to say anything else because I want to introduce her. But she's been in the addiction field for over 30 years, and she doesn't look a day over 31. Josie, come on, where are you? What's up?
Hello. Hi, Saf.
How you
Thank
doing?
you.
30 years, really?
Well, since 1987, so however long that is, I always say.
That's
I've been
wonderful.
in healthcare and behavioral health since 1987. So primarily addiction, maybe 25 of those years, and then healthcare otherwise. But I was young. I was very young. I grew up at the University Loma Linda and started working at the medical center, and then found my home in the behavioral medicine center. I started working in the behavioral medicine center and said, wow, this feels great. Feels like my house. I found my people.
The one question I always ask is anyone who gets involved in this field, and we were talking off air, is because when I was growing up, I didn't say to myself, look, I'm going to be in the mental health and addiction field.
Right.
I found myself in this field because I've got personal experiences from addiction and mental health. How did you get into this field in such a young age? What was your story behind that? Love to hear it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and like I was mentioning before, how much time do we have? But I'll actually try to give the Reader's Digest version of my story. So my father was an alcoholic. So I grew up ACOA. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. My dad was my favorite human being on the planet. I would say that I was Bonnie and Clyde. My criminal years were before I was 10. Because my dad was my favorite person. He died when I was 10. But when we were together, he was always drunk, and he would, take me places, liquor stores, things like that. So I had my father, who was an alcoholic, and he was Catholic, and I was raised Catholic through that. And then my mother, who was not, and she was Seventh-day Adventist. So I was raised Seventh-day Adventist and Catholic, so two very conservative religions, and each one said the other wasn't the true, whatever. So the truth. So my dad, though, he was the person in my life that was so easygoing and fun and just loved me. I was the baby. And when he died, I didn't understand. I never understood why he couldn't stop drinking. I knew that his doctors had told him he couldn't drink anymore. And on my birthday, he took me and my brothers and sisters. We went out for a birthday party, and we dropped him off at the bar. He hadn't drank. And I said, Dad, Daddy, I thought you weren't supposed to drink anymore. He said, I'm just going to have one beer and that's all. Okay. So the next morning I wake up and my dad was dead. So he had more than one beer and he died on my birthday when I was 10. So I always thought there was something that I did, of course. I was 10. So I thought, why didn't he love me enough not to drink? So my whole life, I wondered those things. And meanwhile, I'm being raised in this very conservative town of Loma Linda, University Adventist town and churches. And so I could never tell growing up in my private schools, tell my friends how my dad died. It was always, he died of a heart attack, right? Or something. He never died from alcoholism because that's just not something we talked about. So fast forward when I was about 18 and I started going I was probably about 15, 16, I started volunteering at the hospital just because it was right across the street from my house, basically, the university. And I started volunteering, and then I started working and going to school at Loma Linda. And I found the first few years of working in the medical center, it was great, and going to school, but I never felt at home there until I took a part-time job on the weekends at the Behavioral Medicine Center down the street. And at the university, we called it the BMC, the Bowel Movement Center. Everybody called it the Bowel Movement. And that's where the Addiction and Behavioral Mental Health Center was. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll just take a part-time job. I need some extra money. I went there, started working in their admissions department on the weekends, and I found my people. I finally felt like I was around people that maybe understood. I told them about what happened with my dad, started doing my own work, started going to school to be a counselor in my early 20s. And I just felt the passion. And admissions wise, I filled up the place. They love me. Everybody I talked to, every family member, every alcoholic, I just got them in because it was my goal to get everybody sober. And so shortly after that, I started going to Al-Anon, and that really saved my life. So, when I went to Al-Anon and found that I was powerless over all of it, that was over 25 years ago. That's when I found my peace. And spiritually, I started down my spiritual path in Al-Anon. even though I'd been, to church for many years. So that's my story. And I've been passionate for the families this whole time. I love working with addicts. I love working with families and connecting the families with their services so that they also know that it's not their fault, that they have their own. It's important for family members to go to Al-Anon and to know that as family members, we're our own person and they're their own person. And also, to bridge that gap with behavioral health and addiction and families. So families to me are, of course, very important to our programs that I do.
Thank you for that, Josie.
That's how I came in with my dad.
Well, when you just talked about your dad and what happened, it sort of touched me, and I thought I was going to cry, actually. I could feel it, man, because I'm a dad as well myself.
Yes.
And I'm in recovery myself now. And I did a radio show once where I had my daughter on, and it was one of the most powerful shows that I've ever been involved with. And I think I might get her on here as well, because I think it sort of went semi-viral, and it was amazing. And
yes.
But she had an opportunity to tell me.
Wow.
And because it was through her teenage years that, and I call it, when I was in the madness, and at the age of 22, she told me a lot of things that I needed to hear, but she chose to tell me live on air. That's right, of course. Yeah, best way. But it was, but I think the reason why I do shows like this and like that is to give a message of hope and to help people out there, and that's why we do what we do. Yes. But she had the opportunity to tell me, and I know your dad's proud of you, what you're doing today, because the work you're doing today, and you are doing some phenomenal work, and you have been for over 30 years, and it all started with that traumatic event, really. It seems.
Yeah, I really didn't want my dad's legacy to be an alcoholic drunk, that died of alcoholism at 42. So in a sense, I feel like this is his legacy as well, because so I do feel his presence quite a bit, and I believe that he is, proud of me, and that's the reason. I believe that that's the reason why it happened. I mean, we all are here for a purpose. So I didn't want his life's purpose just to be a memory of that, which is easily, to be. So for me, it's not. He was so critical in my life that I had to figure it out, what really happened, what happened to Dad, and how did that affect my life? And it did affected my relationships. It affected everything until I started working my own program. So I think it's important for people to know that, addiction is a family disease. So it's the addict, of course, but the family members also, we need help so that the entire family can get healed. And family members struggle as much as the addict. And when the addict is in recovery, the family member's in recovery. I've seen this over and over. When the addict relapses, the entire family relapses. And I tell that to our families when they call in and say, oh, I've been to family programs 5 times. I'm like, yeah, well, you're still going to, everybody's back to step 1 now. Because I'm sure you enabled him over this last 6 months of his relapse, So everybody's back to step 1, not just the addict.
It's funny, when I first came into recovery, I was going to the fellowships myself, and that's why I got introduced to the 12-step program. And while I'm going there, my wife's going to Al-Anon.
Yes.
And I'm more worried about what they're saying about me.
Right. Which has nothing to do with you, as a matter of fact. That's the wonderful
Thanks,
thing.
Josie. I know.
Everybody always thinks it's about them. It's not. It's, totally.
Well, we don't even mention we're addicts, Josie. We're addicts. We're selfish people. You know
That's
that.
Right. Like,
it's always about me.
That's the beauty of Al-Anon. We never mention you once.
Oh, really?
That's right.
That's a relief, because I don't want to. Yeah, but I think that's what
at least that should be the goal of Al-Anon now.
It should be, yeah. And you're saying it's not about us, and I think that's what the 12 steps did to me. It made me come out of myself, because it was always about me. in
Right.
addiction, it was always about me, and
Yes.
I'm sure you
Always.
see that every day in your work. And
Mhm.
so do you actually do the 12 steps in your treatment center? Is that
Yeah, we
part of
do.
the program?
We have a 12-step philosophy at ATS, and we also bring in other modalities, mindfulness. We have DBT groups. So we use Hazelton's Living in Balance as our curriculum. And so that's a balanced curriculum. But our therapists and our counselors also, I encourage them as the owner to bring in their tools. Bring in your passion. How do you work well with our clients? And I want you to bring that to the table. So I've always, wanted our therapists to bring in their groups as well, because everybody comes in usually with their favorite groups and stuff like that to do, their connection, because the most important piece is to connect with the client, whatever that looks like. And we can just bring the tools that we know, that we've been taught,
Yeah.
and that we can see is evidence-based. I always say evidence-based. Of course, we're state, certified, so we're an outpatient. We do day treatment, and we're CARF accredited. We do evidence-based, but I would say, evidence-based, where is the evidence? I mean, that's always a tough one, but we do outcome studies and things like that. But really, it's up to that person whether they're ready or not. So when the family member says, well, what is your success rate? We say, well, we're above the national average, but yet it's up to the individual. So
Well, it's always about being willing and accepting you got a problem, and that's what step one's all about, isn't it?
that's right. Yeah.
So from the time you were in your work experience at the hospitals, if you like, and learning, and you became a counselor and you studied,
Mhm.
when did you start ATS, and how did that come about?
Well, through the years, I've been working. I worked at the hospital. I went on my own in 2000, actually. So I worked at the hospital for like 13 years, and then I started my own company in 2000 called Villarreal and Associates, and that's my maiden name. And that is a marketing and events agency. So I found my passion with marketing for treatment centers and doing admissions, and also putting conferences together. I love event planning. That's like, if I could do anything, it's plan a party. So I put conferences. Yeah. So I've been
A sober party, I reckon. Yeah.
sober, of course, all with
Of
CEUs
course.
and everything. CEUs, continuing education, lunch for the therapists. Those are my parties. And so they're network luncheons. And so I started the first network luncheon in Malibu back in probably 2003, because I wanted to connect people in our field, and they were all very competitive. So I, put a big lunch together at one of the treatment centers I was working at, and we brought everybody together. And that was the best marketing opportunity for each other, because we networked together and we referred back and forth. So that's how I started my business, with networking with therapists. And I built a very large email list, over 100,000 professionals. And so that's my passion. I've been doing that for 20 years. In the meanwhile, my husband and I, we were shareholders in a treatment center in Astoria Point. So I went up there to be an interim CEO about 9 years ago. And that lasted 2 years, my interim, as I was a board member. So once I became a CEO of a 55-bed facility, it just kind of gave me the bug. So then I opened up 2 other facilities. And then as a CEO, I was just on this roll for 2 years, opening up facilities. And then my husband, Jim, and I decided to open up ATS, just with our own, without investors and things like that, about 8 years ago. So my son is also in recovery, and he knows I share the story. So a lot of my passion now, front forward, is of course, my family. My husband's in recovery, but my son, he almost died. Of course, one time he had relapsed, and he was in Colorado. There was no outpatient center for him to go to, and I've been working in this field for years. I couldn't find any resources for him, so he ended up relapsing, and I did all that, got him back into treatment. But I at that point I realized there was this gap, in treatment continuum of care, which would be like a community-based intensive outpatient day treatment, where I let anybody come to the program for a free aftercare if they're alumni of any program, just so they can have a place to check in if they're kind of, and we give them a free tune-up for a week if they just need a tune-up, because I think sometimes people just need a tune-up if they're having a struggle in their recovery. But otherwise, I was able to develop that myself and my husband and I, without any corporate saying how to put your program together. So we made it, community-based, and we have sober livings we refer to. We are adults and adolescents, mental health primary as well as addiction. We do outpatient detox. So we have all these services that we provide for the local community, and we're in network with most insurances and some Medicaid. So, I'm just here available for the community, and that's how we started ours. It evolved. It evolved into that from a passion project. My son was the motivation. He's doing well right now. He's in recovery, thank God. But, so we're there for the community, and I'm still doing my events and some marketing things as well through Recovery View. That's where Villarreal morphed into Recovery View, my platform for conferences and so forth.
It's interesting to see that arguably the three most important men in your life were all addicts.
Yeah, I know. That's not right. Surprising when if you look at it from.
And you've never been an addict, right, Josie? You never.
No, I've never been an addict, and I've had food problems. I mean, I've had problems with food. I stress eat. Yeah. We all have something. I always say we're recovering from something. Everybody is.
I've heard that somewhere before. We should do an event about that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why we came up with that, because I always say that everybody's recovering from something. It's a human condition.
I like that.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna chat to Debs and tell her we should do an event about that. A 3-day event, maybe.
Yeah,
what
that's
do you reckon,
right.
Debs?
That's right. That's right. She's working on that one.
Yeah.
But it's all inclusive, and that's what Recovery View's been about, all inclusive. So we have articles up there on eating disorders and adolescent gambling addiction, because people tend to have cross addiction if they're not, if they haven't done all of their worked on all their trauma that they have and any of their issues, they might have from their addiction and before. So then if they might be clean and sober from alcohol and drugs, but then it could go on to something else. It could go to gambling. It could go to sex addiction. It could go to shopping. It could go to work. Oh, a big thing for me is workaholic. Oh my goodness. I've been working since I was, like I said, a teenager, and I rarely stopped except these last few years on my spiritual journey. Now I, have more balance in my life, but that was definitely. So it's all about balance and, imbalance. So I can honestly say that I have had different addiction problems, but it just hasn't been with drugs and alcohol. It could be with work, could be with food. Yeah.
Do you think, I know my belief on this is only because of my experience, but do you think every addict, mainly substance misuse and behavior addict like gambling, have suffered some kind of trauma in their life at some point? There's a reason why they've.
I would say so. I think most humans have, but particularly addicts. I can't think of many that we've had that haven't had something in their life. And that's why it's important. We have our psychologist that works with our clients as well on the trauma, the inner child. So once he can go and do that inner child work with them, then those things pop up. And it could be the most subtleties of traumas as well. It could be that they didn't realize when their parents were working that was a trauma because they felt abandoned, even though their parents gave them everything. And, that's still considered traumatic. And that gives a lot of different abandonment issues and things like that. And so we all do the best we can. So I do believe, and then I believe every time there's a relapse, there's trauma. Anytime I've looked at the clients and they come back and then they would do their intake again, they had so many traumatic experiences, just that last one, because everyone seems to be worse. Every relapse, they go a little further in, so there could be all of these other new traumas that are brought to, whatever it is, when you're out on the street and in a crack house, that happens. And you're not, you've already been, you've been already in recovery, you've seen this other side of life, and then you go back there, it becomes traumatic again. And then you don't realize that all those years of using is trauma. There's a lot of traumatic things, especially, I can't say especially, but I would say in particular for women, because women have a lot of traumas in their addiction based on, maybe what's going on, a lot of rapes, just things like that, sexual things that become more traumatic for them later.
Well, I totally agree. 100%, literally 100% of the clients that I've worked with, and I've worked in the prison services as a drug and alcohol practitioner. I work in the community, and literally, I'd say every single client stroke patient that I have worked with has suffered some kind of trauma.
I would say.
Yeah, not to say that everyone who suffers trauma becomes an addict, no, but every addict that I've worked with has definitely suffered some kind of trauma, and I could totally relate to that. And me myself as well. You know, we had a traumatic life, and that was like the escape for me. It really was. And
yeah, it was a tool until it didn't work anymore, right? It was just, something that was the drugs and alcohol work as a escape, like you said, as a survival skill almost, or something to survive, so that you just don't break. So it's until that doesn't work anymore, and then you realize at that point what we're going to start looking at this. But initially, I believe it is to help with the pain of whatever you're going through during that traumatic time. And a lot of addicts start using young during those times.
You know what I mean? I first had a drink, and it was a big drink at the age of 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then and the next 33 years was just progressed into drugs and everything. But I was wondering, Josie, what's your take on psychiatry within addiction?
Well, I think psychiatry is very important within addiction. And again, that goes back to we were talking about mental health and mental health and addiction, how the dual diagnosis is one thing. When most addicts have a dual diagnosis, so they may have depression, anxiety, something like that. But mental health itself, straight mental health, is its own thing, and we treat that. And we have to, when we have our mental health clients at ATS, and we just changed our name actually to Addiction Therapeutic Services because of our mental health, so that mental health clients won't feel the stigma, because they truly don't have an addiction. They are struggling with a true mental illness, and they struggle to just do basic daily things, take a bath and just, groom themselves. And so their capacity is limited. And the psychiatrist is important. My husband is a PA. He's a physician's assistant in our field in addiction. And he has his boards in psychiatry and addiction medicine. So he sees both. He works for a psychiatrist and an addictionist for over 20 years. So, he works with psychiatry. And I think it's important, if they need their meds, to have their meds, but to stay on them and to work with a psychiatrist. There are true diagnoses that require medication management. And I've seen it through the years with our clients, that when they get off their meds, they end up suicidal. They end up, in a bad place. They come back in. And for all these years working with mental health clients, it's not about whether they're going to relapse. It's kind of when are they going to not even relapse from taking their meds. That's the whole thing, is med compliance, because they don't feel themselves on their meds, so they don't like taking their medication. So it's important that they work with their psychiatrist, and then they let them know when they're off their meds, just come back in, let's get you back on your meds, and just work from where we are today without any judgment. Because every family member of somebody who has a mental illness knows when their loved one is being compliant on their medication with their therapist and their psychiatrist, and when they're not. Everybody knows. And it's so I definitely think that psychiatrists are important in our field of addiction treatment, for the assessments, and to work with our dual diagnosis clients, as well as, of course, in just with our mental health clients. So psychiatrists are key. And there are a lot of psychiatrists that do prescribe other meds that are addictive meds as well. So if you're an addict, you just kind of have to be careful if you have a psychiatrist that wants to give you Xanax or benzos or things like that. Although those meds might be appropriate for somebody that doesn't have an addiction. So it gets a little complicated, but there are psychiatrists that have their boards in addiction medicine as well. So those are the ones, if you tend to have an addiction problem, that I would recommend you seek, are the ones that have, that work with addicts as well.
It seems quite different in the US, because in the UK, CMHT, which is Community Mental Health Team, and psychiatry, they won't touch you if you're in active addiction.
Oh.
They won't. They will. You have to stop using to get a psychiatric diagnosis.
Okay.
For me, when I first came into recovery, or before that, I lied and said that I had stopped using because I wanted to get diagnosed. Right. I wanted to see if there was something behind my madness. And there
Well, it
was.
does make sense that you can't really diagnose until they have about 30 days claimed, because you don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg is what they say, So there's a lot of, co-occurring that goes back and forth. But the psychiatrist, I think it's good to just have them available then if they won't see somebody, but then to go after. And the reason why is they want them to be off the drugs so they could see who they truly are. How much of this behavior are the drugs and how much of this behavior is the person? So for true diagnoses, I would say that most psychiatrists won't they cannot come up with a diagnosis for 30 days. Now, our psychiatrists will see our clients, but they may not treat them. They can diagnose them. It's just they're going to get them stable and detox first, and then then they can start with the diagnoses. So it's a little tricky, and that would be the reason, I would guess, that I'm sure that why they're saying that they won't. But ours have bridged the gap more than that. At least they'll start treating them in the beginning, and then they'll let them know, well, we won't have a diagnosis until after you're detoxed. So we can really see what's going on.
I mean, a big part of bipolar is addiction. That's addiction and bipolar go hand in hand, don't they?
I had an addiction doctor who was an addictionist for many, many years say that that he hadn't met, what did he say, a bipolar patient that wasn't an addict. So, I mean, yeah.
That was my thing as well.
Yeah.
But no, this is fascinating because I love the work that you do, and especially not only have you got this amazing facility, you've also got, we spoke about it, you've got this online publication, which I was honored to write an article in, and thank you for that, because it was great to be of service again. But how did that come about? Did that come about before ATS or around the same time or after?
It came about 12 years ago. Because I had so many events and CEUs and things that I was doing, I was very active in our community nationally. So I would even put events on in Manhattan and, Florida. So I had all these national things with my continuing education. So people would ask me, well, where's your website, Josie? What's your website? I'm like, well, I don't have one. I just go and do these events and I bring people together, and I have a large email list. So it came about with a friend of mine, Dr. Tian Dayton. We were at her house in Manhattan, and a group of us women, we were just kind of talking about bridging the gap, bridging the East Coast and the West Coast. There were a bunch of us, of therapists, talking about their passions and what they, and Tian's written several books. So we were with authors. I said, well, maybe I'll work on a website, where we can put everything that I do online. So that's where Recovery View came from. So I thought, instead of addiction, I wanted recovery. That was a little more positive. And View, I wanted viewpoints from every angle. So in the beginning, it started out for professionals, as a platform for professionals to submit articles and their books. So we featured their books. We gave continuing education online. So it was kind of my events online. So instead of, if people couldn't go to one of my conferences, they could at least do it online. That was 12 years ago, before all this stuff, technology stuff started happening. And I just needed a place to put everything that I was doing. So that's how Recovery Review started. And we would do a monthly edition with all these authors. So we have so many pages of original content. And it's been a passion project for me, because it's never really made much money. It's always been something that I've paid for, because I didn't want it to be about advertising. I wanted it to be true educational articles, and where our authors could feature their books, and they could do peer reviews with each other's books. And then it came that the public ended up getting really interested in it about 6 years ago, because the articles were very good about families and all these things we're talking about. So now we're relaunching it. I didn't do a whole lot for a couple years with it, but we do have a large email list, over 100,000, and people love it. So whenever we send it out, it goes to a big, the way I did it was through emails, because they were all professionals in our field. But now with Debbie's help and spirituality gone, well, I'm trying to get it out more to the public, because it is very good information for public, and they can go and reach out to these professionals, these authors in our field, who most, if you were a counselor, you would know. We had before he passed away, John Bradshaw would do articles for us, and we have Claudia Black, and all of those wonderful people that I know and love, and they would submit articles for Recovery Review. So but it was a passion project. It always has been. It's just been the platform to put and we'd have a calendar up there for events. So it'd be the one place where people could go in our field and just kind of see what's going on.
No, I love it. I'm absolutely. I mean, you're cooking with gas, Josie. You are
Yeah,
cooking
that
with gas.
was 12 years ago.
Yeah,
That
but still,
amazes me because now I don't know that I would have the fortitude to do.
no, but I mean, there's so much that you're doing in recovery for recovery, or people in recovery. It's just, it's so lovely to it's so lovely to see. Well, what's your take on the police and and recovery? I mean, how is it in the US? How is it in California when?
Well, you know what's interesting? I've been thinking about this. I thought about this, and I'm glad you asked that question because for most of these years, the last 20 years that I've been marketing and networking for on behalf of treatment centers and our industry, I've reached out to the police department, different police departments. I've gone to first responders conferences to try to, to reach out to police departments to give them our information. And they always tell me that they can't take that information, that you have to go through the judges and the attorneys to get referrals, for all these people. And so the other day when all this was happening, defunding the police and talking about putting social workers out there, that, oh my God, those poor social workers, I can't even get a social worker. They're just not that available. How are they going to put social workers out there instead of cops? So I started thinking, oh my word, so I thought if at least they would bridge the gap and let us as an industry connect with the police departments. We're already professionals. And I was thinking, how am I going to get to my legislator? I was already, I'm part of an advocacy coalition in California, Addiction Treatment Advocacy Coalition. So I'm going to talk to them about how can we get this, because I thought at least let's start with letting the police give referrals to us. Let us go educate the police and tell them we're here. Because they can't even give referrals. I've never directly, they just say, no, we just we put them in jail and then, you go get them at the court by the time they go to court. So I think just to get started, at least allow them to give referrals to professionals, or see if professionals can come in and help solve this problem. Because we're the ones that know how to work with the addicts and with the mental health. We've been doing it for years. We get clients at ATS that are from the courts, and we do very well with them. We had one that had 8 DUIs, and I thought, oh boy, but he had already done jail a couple times. And when he came in, he had never been offered treatment, ever, in all those 8 DUIs. And so to this day, and he was able to do some more time. We worked with his family. He's still sober after 2 years, first time in treatment with us, and he got it. But that was after 8 DUIs and how much jail time. So I just think I know there's a disconnection between the law enforcement and the services. So I'm hoping that they can see that and somehow we can bridge that gap, at least to get started. And I believe I think in London, do you guys call them peace officers rather than police officers? See, I think if we call them peace officers and then connect to services, connect the dots, and not have, then it would be that much better for everybody.
It's like I saw a program once, and I'm not sure which state it is in, but you get police officers and addiction therapists going to various needle parks,
yes,
and approaching the addicts and giving them a choice.
That's great.
Do you want to get arrested, or do you want to get treatment?
You want to go to treatment. Now that would be amazing. Connecting the services with, and because so I'm hoping that that's the direction that they'll go and go more.
That's fascinating. I love that idea. Love that idea.
Yeah.
We should all be doing that.
You would think that it was a no-brainer that they would refer already, but I know they don't, because they can't. Their hands are tied. They're busy. They're doing their thing the way they do it. But now that they're really looking at it, I think they should look at how can we as an industry help the police figure this out, be part of the conversation and the solution.
Definitely, I totally agree with that, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons why I worked in prisons and jails as a drug and alcohol practitioner, because the prisoners are going to get released, and if they haven't sorted their drug problem out, there's every chance that they're going to go back again.
That's right.
My role in prison was to provide them treatment, psychosocial treatment, to help them overcome their traumas, to help them, or to try and hope that they don't reoffend and come back again.
Did you find success with them? Did you see light bulbs go off when you were doing that?
I did. I mean,
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I most definitely did.
Yeah.
A lot of them were there just to tick the boxes because
Right,
they had
of
to
course.
be there.
Yeah.
As
Whatever
part of
reason, everybody has to be there, right? Just get them in the room.
Yeah,
Like God do the rest
exactly.
of the work. Yeah.
I think when I introduced mindfulness to a room full of murderers, that was an experience. Put it this way. But you
Right.
know what? It's what we do. It's what we do. And if it helps them not to reoffend, if we can save someone else,
Mhm.
because of the
Or and
treatment that
even
we
make a
provide.
difference in their life. I'm guessing they have not been exposed to this work
Right.
ever.
Right.
So for them to even have some exposure, to have a mirror for, a
Yeah.
spiritual mirror to themselves, that's a could be a great experience for them. Because
Oh,
I'm sure they
fantastic.
may not even understand why they're, but they just know that that's where they're at. I know when we've worked with that, somebody I could think of this one client that was going to go to prison, possibly. He thought for sure he was going to go to prison. But he was with us, like you said, to do what he had to do before prison, so that it look good on his record, whatever. But then he got it. He got the program. And but when he knew he was going to court and he thought he was going to go, I could tell that last few days he had changed, his whole demeanor changed. He got into this, I'm going to prison mode. He had to get into this tough mode because he had been a real softie with us for, several months, and he had been awesome, but he had to put on, of course, but when he went to the courts, they actually deferred it. And he is still clean and sober. He's one of our alumni for 4 years, but he had done so much stuff that he was ready to just, he was sure he was going to go to prison, but he didn't. And he's still doing very well. But I'll never forget that, they had to put on that whole, that whole prison facade to protect themselves. But then that's not really who he was. So I think that's amazing to do the work in prison and just break that shell a little bit for them.
How does it feel for you, Josie, when you see a client come in broken, totally broken from addiction and not wanting to live, and you see them leave a different person? And how does that make you feel? That must be just the most wonderful feeling in the world, right?
Well, that's what keeps me coming back every day for 30 all these years, because it is pretty exhausting. A lot of them aren't grateful. They leave flipping me off, and I'm like, oh well. I mean, it's it could be the most ungrateful crew that you work with.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, every time I think, oh my goodness, I'm exhausted, I've been doing this for so long, then I might get a text message from somebody that sends me a picture of their baby, and how they're doing with their husband, and I'm like, oh my God, can you believe this person? And it's usually the one that I don't expect, to hear from, that they're doing really well. Somebody, so it is the best feeling to see our alumni. I cry. I've cried. I had one who came back after a few years, and I didn't know how he was going to turn out, and we never do, but he had gone to Florida. He came back, and he was working in a treatment center himself. He was going to start, he was working in treatment, and I literally cried. I mean, and I do that a lot when I see them. It's just, I mean, and not that it has to do with me, it has to do with God. But he came to us, and he thanked us for what we did, for having ATS. And I get that a lot, and it is the most beautiful experience, because it just is. I mean, it's a miracle. They're miracles, and I believe in miracles. I see miracles every day with our clients. And so I don't give up on them, and the mental health clients as well. Some of our mental health clients that nobody else would take into their facilities, and we brought them into ours, and they're doing great. One day at a time. They're doing great. They're doing wonderful. Their families are doing good. And these were people that were literally thrown away, pretty much.
Mm.
And I'm like, I'll take those ones. We'll figure it out. If you don't, some people know that if they're not going to take somebody, they're like, let Josie give them a shot. And I'm like, okay.
But then you got the flip side to that coin, haven't you? Unfortunately, in the last 3 years, I've been invited to 30 funerals, and that's the reality. That's the reality of this demon of addiction. I mean, I'm sure you've had your experience with a few deaths as well.
I have, like my little angels. They're my little angels in heaven that I know are there, and I know each one of them that have gone through ATS. And a couple from my other centers that had relapsed afterwards. Nobody had died at ATS, but once they've discharged and they relapse, and then we find out that they overdosed young. Yeah, it's been really tough. So they're the angels that we have that we have up there. And their families are considered, the families are, they're, you know, I worry about their families too, because they don't, so, you know, we reach out to their families, but they're never the same, of course, because we, you know, there were two best friends that came in at the same time. They were both heroin addicts. They did well for a long time, you know, in our program. They graduated. One of them, right after graduation, he had gotten a job as a chef. And he went to a sober living, and to celebrate, he had gotten a fentanyl patch from his friend who was dying from, you know, cancer, and he overdosed. And then, and his parents had set boundaries with him, but, you know, he got the fentanyl patch and he overdosed. This was 8 years ago, when we first opened ATS One. And then the best friend, fast forward years later, did the same thing, but his parents, because of the other one, because they were friends with the parents, had really hovered over him and kept him at home and did all those things, sent him to treatment over and over. And he still overdosed, even though they were with him all the time. So that really was eye-opening for me, because I thought there's no reason. It's all, you know, a mystery, because one of them, the parents had set the boundaries that happened. One of them, no boundaries at all. Let me just keep him here in the room and let him do whatever he wants, and I'll keep him alive. And that didn't work either. So, you know, that's the difficult when you're working with families and saying, let them go, knowing that farewell. And as a mother for my son, I've had to let him go, also knowing that I don't know if he's going to be alive or not after this time I see him. But that's where it's all in God's hands. You know, that's where it's a mystery. But yeah, and that's why it's so important to do this work.
In terms of aftercare, what's because in the UK we have facilities, we have safe places, we have charities in the community. But once the treatment's finished, and once their time's up, and it's up usually because of funding,
right.
There isn't a lot in the UK for aftercare. Because that's when the work really starts, right, Josie? That's when, and I'm trying to. I'm part of a men's mental health charity. I'm a trustee of a recovery community as well. But I'm trying to implement things for after the treatment. Trying to put things in place. There's only so much signposting you can do, but I'm trying to continue the therapy in some way. I know funding's a big
important piece, and that's why that's the level of care that I do. And I've been working residential my entire career up until I opened up ATS, and I found my passion here because this is where they can do their work and they can stay with us. They stay with us until their insurance, you know, like you said, usually until their insurance runs out. But then if they need more, I'll scholarship on the back end usually, so they can stay longer, or they can come for free aftercare forever. I tell them, you know, they can come to group once or twice a week forever once they're in aftercare, and they can do those tune-ups, you know, whenever. And we'll have alumni come in maybe after 2 years that maybe had a death in their family and they were feeling like using. So they'll call us, and then they'll come for a week for free and just get a tune-up. So I think if you're available for them to do stuff like that and you're able, I'd rather scholarship on the back end that way to keep them longer, rather than just do scholarships when they first come in, because there's usually, I find there's really very little gratitude in that, you know, and stuff like, you know, because then you're just scholarshiping all day long. But I like for them to come in with anything, even if it's a partial scholarship. But it's important for aftercare to keep, if you're an outpatient, or you can have an outpatient, an IOP, and transition them and keep them. I have one gentleman that's with us for 2 years. He's an older adult that has Korsakoff's, so he has memory problems. He forgets not to drink. That's his big. So he's, you know, he still comes twice a week. And he does his group. He doesn't drink, and you know, we remind him no drinking. So yeah, but it's critical. Aftercare is critical.
Oh God, I think it's probably the most important part after treatment. Even during treatment, if it's outpatient treatment, they still got to go home, right?
Yeah.
And that's the test. That's the test. And
that's where the rubber hits the road, I always say. Let's see what you do when you go to the grocery store and you pass the booze aisle. Let's see what you do. You know, now here there's so many of these marijuana shops everywhere. You know, driving back in your neighborhood with your drug, whatever. So they can process all that in group, and that's the good part. Yeah.
We've got a lovely message here from someone I think you may know. Dr. Steve Grinstead. Does that name ring a bell to you?
I do.
He's saying you're looking good.
Oh, well, thank
He goes, thanks for sharing your story. People need to know long-term recovery is possible. Onward and upward with hope and gratitude.
Yes, thank you. And Dr. Steve Grinstead, he's amazing. He's written several books, and he specializes with relapse prevention and chronic pain patients.
Okay, great.
So it's pretty good.
I love this. I love recovery. I love everything about recovery because I'm in recovery.
That's right.
It's just wonderful, man. It's wonderful. So you deal with all addictions, right? Behavior, all drug addictions, eating disorders.
We do not do eating disorders. We'll refer them, we'll assess them, and I'll send them to a specialist because that is very specialized eating disorder treatment. We'll do addiction, mental health. So we can take mental health clients who have, schizophrenia. As long as everybody's stable, bipolar, major depression, anxiety, everybody's clear to be at our level. Then we can definitely keep them going in their work and stable. And then addictions, all addictions, and ages 11 to 17 in our adolescent program. And
that's amazing. 11 years. That is amazing.
Yeah.
That's when you can get them. When you get them at that age, there's every chance that they'll live.
Yeah, when we can get them it's difficult with the kids. I mean, we can only do the best we can because they're so invincible at that age, and then most of them come in because of their parents bring them in. But that's fine. We've had some that are alumni and they're doing very well, and then we have some that come back after a year and realize that, wow, that didn't work for me. So with our adolescent and children, we have a family program that the families have to be involved with their treatment in order for them to be in our program. So that's very important with the kids as well as adults, but especially with the kids. And then we have after school. So we do after school program.
That's brilliant.
So they go
in terms of heroin addicts, I'm assuming you guys provide scripts, methadone scripts and Subutex and.
We're state certified and CARF accredited to do the medication assisted treatment and the outpatient detox. My husband Jim does that with our doctors that we have. And with our program, we don't just give a prescription. So they can't just come in, and get a script and go. They have to they have to do treatment with us. So they must be in treatment. Yeah, they have to be in treatment. We're not. And I'm not judging other doctors, what they do, and providers, but I know for us, we've always been an abstinent-based program. And so we had to get with basically kind of get with what's happening with treatment and be cutting edge. So with that, I really looked at the MAT and how that's going to work in our program, because I knew it would help the majority of the people, the heroin addicts that cannot just go get off of it, go straight heroin. I know that. So they come in and we have a goal for them to get off of it at some point and get on Vivitrol. And it could be, we don't know what that goal is. We would like to say 6 months, but it could be 8 months. We're not sure. So we don't give them a timeline so they're not afraid. But they do, because they'd be afraid if we said someday you're going to have to get off of it. They're like, whoa, that's not what this is about. I can go down the street and just, get a script forever. Okay. So if you have any motivation to, we ask, do you have motivation to ever get off of anything and to be abstinent? Yes, I do. Okay. That's all that it takes. A little motivation to be abstinent. They come into our program, they do treatment, IOP, and they get on their medication, and then Jim will monitor them, my husband, and then we work with them to get off of it at some point. And that's been working well. And believe me, it's not the most popular in the, program. We could be making a lot more money just giving the scripts, but we don't do that. So we have literally admitted people, and then they say, no, I just want the scripts. I'm not coming to group. And we'll say, okay, we're going to refer you to another doctor. So that way so our program, we don't have a whole lot in our program because they have to want this, but the ones that are in it are doing very well.
And that's the first thing, isn't it? You got to accept you got a problem and you got to be willing to make a change. Otherwise it makes no.
And that's our philosophy at ATS, but that's not everybody's philosophy. So I know that, there are different things work for different people and programs, but it's if we have a community of abstinence, and then we're bringing in medications, there definitely has to be a goal somewhere to become abstinent in our program.
Well, most definitely. Look, we've got a few minutes left, Josie, and I wanted to before I hear some last words from yourself. We have a big problem in the UK with fentanyl. I don't know how big that problem is in the US, but it is a huge problem in the UK, especially with rough sleepers, homelessness,
Mhm.
and they are being given fentanyl thinking it's heroin.
Right.
And
And
as,
dying.
as you know, it's 100 times stronger than heroin, and it's a big problem here. It's a big problem. Are
Yeah.
you experiencing that as well in the US?
As well. Yes, it has. Yeah, because of course, as an addict, it's like, well, more is better, right? So if fentanyl's more, let's do it. And that's where
Yeah.
we were having so many overdoses about a year and a half ago before we had more education about it, because people just went straight to fentanyl and they were just dying. The kids were dying. And it was a huge crisis. So we did a little bit more research and education on it, and with the families. I'm sure it's still a problem with this coronavirus and everything. We haven't really had, we've had more alcoholics during this time, quite honestly, because everybody's been stay at home. So they've been drinking, but there's still the heroin problem. And of course the fentanyl, but the fentanyl is that was a very scary, thing to come in 2 years ago, about 3 years ago, into the Valley, and into Southern California. So we're
So
well,
that's the
we're
problem.
well aware that, and again, like I said, that my first alumni, that's how he died. Just, put the fentanyl patch on and he was gone that night. So it's definitely something that is a, concern, and the opioid addiction is not over, even though we have a lot going on the planet, but that is still going strong. So we are here to help. And that's why we started the MAT program, so that we would have an option for the heroin addicts to at least, cross over into get off the needles. Let's get you
Yeah.
off the needles. Let's, taper you. That's, somehow just get you back into life skills. Yeah.
You're saving lives, Josie. You're saving lives. Have you got any last words that you'd like to say to me or to all any of the people who are listening and watching this wonderful show?
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on the show. I think,
Oh,
it's amazing that you were even interested in our topic. And I think it's great that you're doing this work as a professional. As an addict, I love it because, it just, again, it gives me hope for every addict that comes in, because like you were saying in the beginning, you're an ex-addict and I'm a provider, and to see that, you're doing well. I know that there are so many more like you out there that are doing the work. Every addict that I've met, and in recovery, they're just amazing. You guys are so smart. You just like, even our older adults that come in, they're just so, they've been doing this for so long. Brilliant people. So don't let, but I just want to thank you for, allowing us to talk about this on your platform and to share our information about what we do. For a long time, it was a big stigma that nobody wanted to talk about, but now people are talking about it and they're actually getting help. So I encourage anybody out there that if you have a problem, to call and get help, and to, just to help your family member, and do what you can, to get clean and sober. For
definitely.
today.
We've got your website coming out. So you've got www.ats-iop.com.
Yeah,
Um,
that's our, and then
and
recovery.
we've got the recoveryreview.com. So this is how you can find Josie. If you want to ask any questions, you can find me on www.saf-surgery.com. We're always here to help, and we're here to give a message of hope. I'm getting loads of messages out here. Diane says special people. Sal Knights is someone who's very dear to me. She's saying amazing lady, and
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. Blessings.
And she's like a sister to me, so I'm so happy that she's watching the show as always. So,
Thank
Josie,
you.
you've been phenomenal. You've made my day. The work you do, I love meeting people like you who make a difference in the world and potentially save lives. And non-judgmental, no discrimination whatsoever. Because as you know, this illness. Do you think it's an illness? Is addiction an illness?
I believe it is. There's enough research to show that it is.
So you believe in the brain disease model?
I
Because some
definitely
people don't.
believe in the disease model, and that's how insurances are paying for us. Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you very much, Josie, and it's been great to have you. And I know we're going to cross paths many more times.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to do things together, and I look forward to it. Just
look-
before you go, anyone famous come to your facility? You have to tell me the name or anything, but any celebrities?
Everyone's famous that comes to our facility. You know.
I love that. I love that. Woo-hoo, I'll make you famous. Thank you very much, Josie, and it's been a pleasure, and you've been a great guest. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching Saf Surgery, Spiritually Gone Wild, and Love Academy, lovecoachacademy.com. Come and see us. Yeah, definitely. And Josie's been a wonderful guest. Next week, we've got someone special again. And everyone's special. Everyone's a celebrity. So please come and join me next week for another show. Yeah, and that's it. God bless you.
God
Thank
bless
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.